Okay, welcome back to Connective Tissue Part 2. Part 2, we are going to learn about cartilage and bone. Recall there are three types of cartilage: hyaline, fibro, and elastic, out of which we are studying one, the most common, hyaline. There are two types of bone: compact, not bone, but rather bone tissue, compact and spongy. We are learning both, but we are learning a lot more about the compact than the spongy. Okay, so first thing first, cartilage. Cartilage is slightly special compared to loose or dense connective tissue because cartilage can withstand a lot more tension and pressure and stress. Okay. Cartilages are capable of withstanding a lot more stress than the loose connective tissue, friction, etc. Cartilages are typically present between bones and they are subjected to a lot of friction. Think of between two long bones, the bone of your thigh, femur, and the bone of the leg. What's between these two? Cartilage. Think of your vertebral column. What's present between each or two vertebrae? Cartilage. So cartilages are capable of withstanding far more tension, far more friction compared to the loose or dense connective tissue. How can they survive this level of friction? How can they withstand? Because cartilages have a special type of ground substance. The ground substance of cartilage, I'm abbreviating there, contains what we call chondroitin sulfate, a substance known as chondroitin sulfate. This chondroitin sulfate, this is what gives or provides a gel-like consistency to cartilage matrix. Because of this gel-like consistency, the cartilage tissue, as a tissue, cartilages are capable of withstanding a lot more stress in form of friction. So right here, we have cartilage in association with other tissue. Cartilage seldom exists alone. Cartilages coexist with other tissue because they are always between, connective tissue, binding, connecting, binding. So this is just a sample of hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is the most common type of cartilage within the body. This is what you will find between bones, at the end of long bones, etc. They don't maintain shape of organs, but they do have the capacity to withstand a lot of tension. So first thing first, because it's a specialized tissue, it also has some specialized feature. So think of those features and you can use those features to identify the tissue. Properties or features. First thing is matrix. Matrix is gel-like, as we just learned. Because the matrix is gel-like, The cells of cartilage, the cells are referred to as mature cells, are referred to as chondrocytes. Recall, we just learned mature cells are cytes, immature cells are blasts. Chondrocytes, which is basically the cells that you find toward the middle of the cartilage sample, are chondrocytes. These cells can't survive within matrix without protection. So they need to have these chondrocytes. They need to have a little special niche, special place for them. So there are tiny cavities, minute, tiny cavities within which chondrocytes are present. And these cavities, these tiny cavities, this is what we refer to as lacuna, individual, singular, lacunae, plural. So with that, let's now look at the sample here. When we are looking at the cartilage sample here, basically this is the matrix. You can notice how it's a little gel-like. You don't see fibers here. Fibers there, but they are obscured by this gel-like matrix. So let's focus on this single cell here. This tiny cavity that you are seeing around the cell. The cells are this dark nuclei. Oftentimes you will find anywhere between 2 to 4 cells within a single lacuna cavity. So this cavity right here, this cavity right here, this cavity right here, these are all lacunae. Or at this showing here, lacunae. Keep in mind, lacuna is singular, lacunae is plural. If you are referring to a single cavity, call it lacuna, not lacunae. And what do we see within? This dark purple, these are the nuclei. These are the chondrocytes. Chondrocytes within lacunae. Okay, so there's the gel-like matrix. So if you look at gel-like matrix, if you see lacunae, you see dark cells, dark nuclei within them, multiple, you immediately know this is cartilage. It looks very unique. In fact, for connective tissue, almost every subtype looks unique. Adipose tissue, areolar, dense regular, dense irregular, cartilages, they all look pretty unique. Cartilage looks nothing like areolar. Areolar looks nothing like adipose. This is what I mean by diversified. Connective tissue is highly diversified. There are varieties of connective tissue subtypes that look completely different from one another. This is just to magnify that. Again, you can see the matrix, the gel-like matrix. The cavity itself, tiny cavity right there. This would be a lacuna, and the cells themselves within the lacuna, basically, this is going to be a chondrocyte. So for example, if we are looking at this one here, that is a chondrocyte. That is a chondrocyte. Okay, you see the nucleus? Chondrocytes. Let's look at the perichondrium. Toward the edge, cartilages come with their own membrane, perichondrium. Most cartilages, let's focus on this here. See what you are looking at here? This right here. This is the membrane. Each cartilage is surrounded by a membrane. The membrane is known as perichondrium. Look at the perichondrium. Does it look like cartilage really? Do you see any lacunae from here all the way to here? Do you see any lacunae? Do you see chondrocytes within the lacunae? Not really. We are beginning to see the lacunae at this level. This is where you are beginning to see the lacunae. And here, of course, you clearly see the lacunae. The cells are within cavities. But here, no cavity, no cavity, no cavity, no cavity. This looks more like dense connective tissue. See here? This looks very much like dense connective tissue because perichondrium is made of dense connective tissue. From the dense connective tissue, cartilage cells are basically produced from the dense connective tissue. They differentiate, meaning they change and become cartilage cells. So as you move from the surface toward the interior, you are seeing less and less dense connective tissue, more and more cartilage. And from here onward, it's all cartilage. Look clearly, you can see the transition. Dense connective tissue here. Dense connective tissue here. Dense connective tissue here too. Little further, oh, you are beginning to see lacunae. So this is cartilage. This is dense connective, but here it's, you are beginning to see cartilage. Okay, so perichondrium is to the surface of the cartilage and it's made of dense connective tissue. Last is bone tissue. Bone, also known as osseous tissue. So basically, osseous tissue or bone tissue. This is a type of connective tissue that we refer to as mineralized. What is mineralized? Of course, the matrix. Bone tissue has a mineralized matrix. Mineralized meaning the salt in the matrix is so dense that it solidifies. As a result, the whole tissue appears solidified. When you feel the bone, it's solid, not gel-like like cartilage, because bone has mineralized matrix. This mineralized matrix contains a salt. It's all about ground substance, right? So the mineralized matrix, the ground substance contains a salt known as hydroxyapatite. Hydroxyapatite. This is what gives bone tissue that solidity. Hydroxyapatite is mineral, which means it's solid, solidified. So what we're looking at here is a sample of Compact bone. Remember the subtypes of bone, or rather, I would say types of bone. Two types of bone tissue: compact and spongy. The name tells you what it is. Compact bone is very compact, meaning units are closely knit, closely tight. Spongy is slightly loose. Spongy is like softer, spongy like. There are holes in between the bone tissue. This compact and spongy bone, why does a sample of bone tissue have holes within? This tells you what it is. Spongy bone. Spongy bone is the place where red bone marrow is present, responsible for blood cell production. So as a result, spongy bone has holes. Those holes contain red bone marrow. Compact bone, there are no holes, no spaces. This is why we refer to this as compact and the other one as spongy. So this is a compact bone. This sample is of compact bone. This just to show you that how everything is so compact. There is no space, no gel, no nothing. Because bones are compact, you will also find lacunae within the bones. Just like cartilage, the cells cannot survive just in the middle of the matrix. The matrix is too solid for them. So, lacunae. When we look at a section of the compact bone, it would appear that the compact bone is made of columns of units. Think of like got stack of quarters. You take a handful of quarters and you stack them as pillars of quarters. And when you are looking at superficially at all those pillars of quarters, each pillar would look alike because each one has a quarter on top, and they are basically made of stacks of quarter. So if you remove a few quarters from each pillar, let's say that's a pillar of quarter column, you stack the quarters in columns. You may remove this first top layer, it's still going to look the same. When you remove this layer, it's still going to look the same because each one is made of the same unit, a quarter, stacks of quarter upon quarter upon quarter. Bone tissue is made of something similar. It's made of units known as osteon. Okay. So think of this as the quarters that are stacked within the compact bone to give rise to the whole tissue of compact bone. So where is an osteon? Basically this entire circle that you look at, this is an osteon. Look at this circle here, an osteon. Look at this circle here, osteon. Between two osteons, so let's say I'm going to draw this. This is an osteon and this is an osteon. This is an osteon. So is this. Between these osteons, one here, then one here, then one here. Between these osteons, these lines, they have a name. We refer to these as interosseous interstitial lamellae. Okay, so let's focus on a single osteon. Let's focus on this one right in the middle. Each osteon has a canal. What you're looking at looks like an empty, large space, empty circle. This canal at the center of each osteon, we refer to this as central canal. This is where blood vessels will be present. Then when you look at around that central canal, around the central canal, see there are circular deposition of the bone tissue, the matrix. These circles are what we refer to as concentric lamellae. Concentric lamellae within the osteon, interstitial lamellae outside the osteon. Lamellae is the plural. If you are referring to a single circle or a single line, it's going to be lamella. So here we are focusing on a single osteon. As you can see, central canal. There's circles. These are concentric lamellae. Between the concentric lamellae, you can see the interstitial lamellae here, and you can see it here too. See how this is concentric? This is concentric, but this is not. This is just line. This is interstitial lamellae. Along this interstitial lamellae or the concentric lamellae, you will find tiny cavities. And we already know the tiny cavities are called lacuna. This is, the arrow is slightly off. These tiny cavities are lacuna, singular. If you are referring to more than one, then they become lacunae. So central canal, concentric lamellae, interstitial lamellae, lacunae. Now let's focus on this. Let's focus on this one. There's a lacuna here. See, there are tiny radiating line. These are tiny channels, little channels that allows the lacunae to be connected with one another. These lines, radiating line, emerging from each lacuna, these are referred to as canaliculi. The way it works, that within the central canal there are blood vessels. So oxygen, nutrient, etc. will diffuse out of the central canal through the canaliculi into the first group of lacunae that are closest. From there, through the canaliculi, next group of lacunae. The lacunae are interconnected via the canaliculi. From there to the next group, the next layer, then the next, then the next. This is why lacunae must be interconnected, and their connection, the connection between all of the lacunae, basically that's what canaliculi are. Each lacuna is connected with another lacuna, which in turn is connected with another, which in turn is connected with this, which in turn is connected with this. So every single osteon is basically getting its oxygen nutrient supply from the blood vessel through the canaliculi to the lacunae. What do we find within the lacuna? Osteocytes. So each lacuna contains an osteocyte. Remember, cyte is mature cell. Okay. Further magnified, you can see how the canaliculi are connecting the lacunae. This is the central canal. You can see the canaliculi connecting to this lacuna, from there to this lacuna, from there to this lacuna. This is how oxygen and nutrients will travel this way outwardly from the central canal. Carbon dioxide, because these are cells, they are metabolizing, producing waste products. Carbon dioxide and other waste products will travel from the farthest lacuna to the next level of lacuna to the next layer of lacuna, ultimately to the vein in the central canal. This is how circulation happens in the osteon. This is why osteons look the way they do. This is a sample of bone where the matrix was dissolved by treating it with a mild acid so that you can see some of the cells in the lacunae. See how the osteons are dissolved? They are purposely done that so that you can see the osteocyte. So this, within this, this, these are basically osteocytes. Each lacuna you can see, some of them are visible, not all of them are. Each lacuna has some cells. Typically, every lacuna will have a single osteocyte. Unlike cartilages, where you see multiple chondrocytes within a single lacuna, in bone tissue, a single lacuna is occupied by a single osteocyte, not multiple osteocytes. Now, spongy bone is nothing like compact bone. This is a sample of the spongy bone. You can see that it's not as dense. It's not compact. It's non-compact, that's why it's spongy. Plus, there are all these spaces. See, all these spaces, these spaces, this space. This is a space. This space or the hole is what gives the name spongy. It's like a sponge. It's filled with holes. So the unit here, the bony part, which has lacunae and lamellae but not osteon, basically just layers of matrix and lacunae with osteocytes. These bony parts are referred to as trabeculae, and what's present within these holes, a lot of it is fat, but this is where you will find the bone marrow. The main function of the spongy bone is not to give support and protection to internal organs, but spongy bone's main function is to serve as a place where blood cell can be produced. This is why spongy bone is spongy. It's filled with hole. Holes are filled with red bone marrow. That's where blood cell is produced. Where do we find this spongy bone? In our flat bones and end of long bones. So that's the end of the connective tissue part 2. We learned about cartilage and bone.